Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is the Python Community News, the show that wants to bring the latest news happening around the Python community to you. I am one of your hosts, Jay, and with me, as always, is
I'm John.
Hey, John. How's it going?
Good. How you doing, Jay?
Good. We've been working trying to get websites and stuff happening, and I don't know if you noticed, but the 24th came and went, and there's a new Python out, and in my job that means I got a lot of testing to do.
Yeah, definitely. So you recently had an article come out about this.
Yeah.
So I, I,
Uh
I definitely want to hear you talk a bit about, what this release process entailed and how I guess how the rest of us can continue on with how we get the latest and greatest in Python.
so yeah, as you mentioned, I did do an article that was talking about, see, now you got me wanting to go like find the link for it and everything. Um the the rollout of 311, at least from the side of the faster C Python team. We actually talked about them recently in one of the previous episodes. Uh,
Yeah, they published I guess Guido published a document for like here's what's coming in 312. So this is sort of the first steps to make all of that possible, right?
yeah, you're gonna have to pause 1 second because I can't share my screen. Apparently, the browser is very upset with me right now. So give me 1 second.
Well, while we wait for Jay to come back, if you're already working on 311, if you're in the chat here, let us know if you've found anything that's broken, how to and how you're going about getting those libraries upgraded and compatible.
Yeah, here we go. All right. Sorry about that. I'm expecting stuff today, and I had to unplug things, and stuff's all wild. But yeah, so I did this interview. I interviewed everybody on the team, the Faster C Python team. Well, I was except for I think like one person. We were in like constant communication, going back and forth on this. And ultimately, I got to learn a little bit about like kind of the initiative behind building this team, putting it all together, and then finally just the understanding of why. Like, why is it important to have a team? Is it important to have a team? Is it dangerous to have a team? Like, there's a lot of questions that people have. Obviously, some folks are afraid of like company interest and things like that happening. But ultimately, all of the conversations that were had with the actual engineers were very excited because you're not talking about like folks who have just gotten out of college. You're often talking about a few people who have been working on Python for, I mean, Guido's there, so like since its inception, but then like also folks who have been working on it for over a decade that went from working on it maybe in their off time or working on it 1 day a week to it being their sole commitment. And I think that there's something to say about that. And currently, I think the community has been overwhelmingly positive on it. I think this week it's like in the top 5 posts on Reddit right now, or in like r/Python. And I've gotten a lot of really good compliments about just the overall conversation that was had. It's a good read. At least I think so. I got to deal with all the comments that came in. This was definitely a collaborative effort. Everybody that was interviewed got to see this and got to explain how I was not misquoting, but people don't like it when you say Python is faster by specifically this much. They're like, well, let's approximately and tests and in these environments and things. But yeah, this was a great topic, and I'm promoting all of this just to say that Python 311 is out now. John, I think I came back in with you mentioning like, hey, test your stuff, build with it. We actually ran into a bug with some of our automation stuff earlier today, where I was like trying to show John something and like it wasn't working in 311, and we're not sure if it's 311's fault or PyM's fault or Homebrew's fault. It's somebody's fault. But yeah, that being said, one of the things that has also kind of come out around 311 as well is the release of a Windows dev kit for Python 311 ARM 60. Well, not Python 311 ARM 64, but there's a new Windows dev kit that is designed to work on ARM 64. These are relatively, for a computing device, they're relatively inexpensive. They're about $600, and from there you can try out things like Python for ARM, which is one of the things that did get released with Python 311 this year. And it not just ARM, like global ARM, but ARM specifically for Windows. I'm going to add this in here now. Yeah, so you can see here you have like this Windows embeddable installer as well as this like embeddable package for ARM 64. And I mean, if you go down to 310, like you have a Windows installer and you have an embeddable. Well, sorry, that's 312. I'm going the wrong way. I'm pretty sure that 310 didn't have these. Yeah, so 10.8, 10.15, like you don't have those. So I don't want to talk too much about it. I will disclose, like, I'm a Microsoft employee, so me telling you to go out and buy one of the devices, I didn't work on the device. I just know that it's designed to work with ARM 64, and it's designed with people who do a lot of machine learning and like data heavy tasks in mind. So if that's you and you want to play around with this, play around with it. There may be bugs. I would say, like, have your employer buy this. Don't spend your own money. That's silly. This is a dev kit, so work with it in a professional setting. But also, as things start to pop up, make sure you report them as if you were reporting a release candidate bug, and jump into that. And John, speaking of reporting, I think we can actually go into kind of the second topic that we have, which is Hacktoberfest is wrapping up. If you don't remember, every October is Hacktoberfest, and because of that, we encourage you to quote unquote start hacking. But we also encourage you to get those issues submitted. John, did you finish yours yet?
I did. I think most of mine were in relation
Python
to
Community
either
News.
Python community news or another community project that I contribute to. So and I think that's pretty representative of how I've contributed in the context of Hacktoberfest in the past as well, right? It's not this I'm not going out of my way, and I said this back when we talked with Phoebe a few weeks back. It's not this thing where I'm like, okay, it's October now, and I'm going to go and do this big, open source contribution that is super impactful to, a project everybody knows about. No, it's these little, a website for our podcast, or a website for, a group of community organizers. Like these are the, conference websites. These are all the kinds of things that I end up getting, a T-shirt or a tree planted for. So none of it has to be. I think that's maybe a sticking point for a lot of people, is like, how do I get this big this big obstacle that is an open source contribution out of the way, right? Doesn't have to be anything like that.
Yeah. And I mean, I did a live stream yesterday with one of my coworkers, and we talked about that. We talked about just the, like, I think there were so many PRs that I had that were like to my own code, and I was like, all right, I don't want those to count. Let me go and like just find people who were missing like codes of conduct for their repos and be like, hey, it's a little thing, it's a small gesture, but like it makes such a big statement to like people in the community who want to contribute to your code. Just having that little blurb there that says, we care about you, we're going to enforce the rules, and we're going to make sure that everybody is taken care of, not just their code, but the people themselves as well. People were happily, I guess they were happy to be like, oh yeah, you're totally right, I just didn't think about it. And then, a couple of PRs later, and all of a sudden I'm getting an email from Hacktoberfest saying, good job, you've done it. And I'm like, oh, well, sweet. Like, let's go from there, I guess.
Yeah, I don't think that it's a small gesture though, right? That's a pretty major uh, change to make in a repository, right?
Yeah.
And right, maybe the existence of a document there is itself small, but um, all the weight behind it of like
Yeah.
we're committing to enforcing these standards, right? That's a meaningful thing.
Yeah, and not to go on about this all the stuff. If you want to see the live stream, go to my YouTube channel. It's there. But one of the things that we talked about in that too was like there was a back and forth because originally I was like, well, here's a template, and the response was, well, I don't know if I can actually enforce this template. Like there, it's asking me to do things. It's asking me to give people like 30-day warnings and things like that and suspensions and like that's not something that I want to be open to enforcing. So then I had to like go and we were like talking about, well, like what are you comfortable with, and then finding examples out there in the wild and saying let's add this one instead. And I think that that's such a key thing that's missed in terms of enforcing things, which we'll talk about a little bit later when we start looking at some of like the health and safety stuff that came out this week. But yeah, I to me it's your contribution needs to, well, it doesn't need to be a conversation, but any contribution that starts a conversation about how someone is going to maintain their code to me is, a pretty big thing. So yeah, thank you for kind of reminding me of that.
And I don't want to cross the streams too much. There's a video of the live stream you did yesterday, up on your YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So folks who want to see all the details there can go and watch it. But I'm very much looking forward to all the tooling you've committed to build for next year's Hacktoberfest.
Oh yeah, we've all of the big ideas. Still not sure about the execution on any of those. Hey, let's change topics. This is where we're gonna settle in for a while. And I definitely think that we benefit from doing a live stream. Which, if you're listening to the podcast, we do a live stream every Friday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern. You can watch us on YouTube. It's on the Python Community News channel. We are working to get that subscriber count up so that we can give you a nice URL that you can go to. But for now, just go to YouTube, search for Python Community News. You'll find us. It's there. You'll see the logo. But
you know what, Jay? I'm going to interrupt you for a second before we move on. I do want to say that right, you and I have completed those Hacktoberfest PRs, but if somebody listening hasn't, and it's before October 31st, you got a few more days.
Yeah, you do, and you can cut your teeth on the PRs that are in all of the Python Community News repos. We will work with you. There are plenty of things that need to be fixed. You can jump in there, and I do believe all of our repos are Hacktoberfest accepted. But
yeah, onto the real topic.
Yeah, onto this big topic. We would absolutely love your opinion on this. The PSF has announced some health and safety guidelines that will, be in effect for PyCon next year. And this also goes hand in hand with DjangoCon announcing a transparency report for code of conduct stuff, and one of those was, talking about folks that are, unmasked or, things like that. So kind of enforcing those rules. And on top of that, oh my goodness, a new project was created called the Public Health Pledge, which is asking for people to commit to only attending events that meet a certain criteria, one around diversity and inclusion, but also, and specifically that, including people with, as it reads, disabilities, chronic illness, and caregivers. So I will just read the criteria for these events. An event must have a health and safety policy. And if the policy changes, it's only strengthened and never weakened between the announcement of the event and the event itself. Second, the event communicates this policy on their website, in the registration flow, in speaker proposal processes, and during regular events promoting the actual conference happening. And then lastly, the event policy includes active measures designed to minimize the number of participants who are infected with transmissible diseases such as COVID-19, as well as mitigate transmission between participants. So when you do things like this would be including things like vaccines or boosters, negative test results, making sure that people can attest like on site that they aren't experiencing symptoms, providing no question asked refunds, and also providing multiple modes of participation. So I'm guessing some type of virtual option for them. And then also some masking policies, and as well as some air ventilation and purification policies as well. So, John, we were talking about this, and you said, and I quote, "This is an area that is especially important to me." So I'm going to be quiet for a few minutes and let you talk this out.
Yeah, I think I said personal, not important, which doesn't mean they're not both true, but um, the reason I said personal is right. I spend a lot of my time working on events, right? It's I used to organize a lot of meetups. I still organize a conference and volunteer for a number of others. So it's a thing that I pour a lot of my own time and energy into. And I think one of the things I said to you before the show was, and I hear people talking about, well, why isn't this event coming back? Like, I want that event back more than most, right? It's a really it's something I deeply care about. Is building these spaces that people can gather in, and I agree with a lot of the what's in this public health pledge, especially that first point of requirements will only be strengthened, right? This is a thing that's become I don't have a lot of data on this, but enough of a trend that it's noticeable, which is events have been doing things like, oh, well, refund window just closed, and by the way, we no longer require masks, right? And that's a really hostile thing to do to your attendees. Not to mention, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I would definitely argue that there was some amount of contractual agreement that's changed here, right? I said that I would come to your event because here are the things that you've listed out and you're doing, and now you've changed that after the refund has or the refund window has closed. So I have a bunch of issues with events that are doing that. The same way I would with things like if you list, here are the kinds of dietary restrictions we accommodate. Oh, and by the way, now we're only serving one kind of food that excludes a bunch of people, right? It's just not it's not a thing I would do as an organizer, and it's not a thing I think anyone should be doing. And so that's a huge part of it, to me, is right, people keep on touting this whole thing of everyone can make their own personal choices about what kind of safety precautions they want to take, and that isn't true once people change the terms of an event. Right? Maybe I've booked travel, maybe I've booked a hotel, and I can't get all of these these fees back after doing that. Even if your refund window hasn't closed and I can get a refund on my ticket, that doesn't mean that's the only cost involved in attending an event. And you know, in addition to all of that, there are a lot of people that participate in events that don't have the choice to just say, okay, well, I'm not doing that anymore. Right? There are people that work events. There are um, people that sponsor events, people that speak at events for their job, right? So when these things change out from under them, it puts them in a really tight spot, and I think that is particularly unfortunate. Um, Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, you mentioned folks that are not like that. I don't want to say that don't have a choice, but like folks that are suggesting, "Hey, I want to go to this conference. I want to speak at this conference," and then like all of a sudden you're doing all the work and they're putting in travel and things are being provided by their company. And I mean, I'm a developer advocate, so like that's my job is to a portion of that is to speak at conferences and to be strategic about what conferences that I want to go to. So yeah, having that change out from under me, like that might actually go against like my company policies of like, hey, you're only like we have a policy in place that says, we only speak at conferences that have a code of conduct. That would be like if all of a sudden I'm like going to this event and they're like, we decided to do away with the code of conduct this year, folks. And like,
Yeah.
obviously you hear that and you'd be like, well, that's silly. No one would do that. But when your code of conduct and your health and safety policy should have pretty equal weight. We actually have a question from chat. Hi, Jessica. It says, did PyCon release any information about what compliance was like for masking, or how many cases seem to have resulted potentially from the event? So I'm guessing this is from this will be from this past PyCon.
Yeah. So they did. I have the PyCon US 2022 transparency report pulled up on my side here, but and Jay, I'll share it with you so you can share it with the crowd. Um, uh, the the gist here is that PyCon US included questions about COVID testing in their host event survey.
Yeah,
And if you scroll to the bottom of that, there's some information about the summary of reported COVID cases. So there were handful of people who tested positive after the event,
I was one
and
of them. I just want to throw that out there that like I was one of those people that tested positive.
I'm also going to contextualize this by saying like all of these numbers are minimum, right?
Yeah,
Um,
these are people that filled out the survey.
these are people that filled out the survey and felt comfortable and like it was a good idea to share this information with the organizers of PyCon, right? Now, if you compare this to other events, right? There was an event that happened a little bit after PyCon US, where there were like an order of magnitude more people uh, ended up getting COVID, and I don't know the exact scale there, but I don't think that event was 10 times the size of PyCon US.
Yeah,
And so PyCon US did have some people test positive for COVID.
yeah.
Um, from my recollection, as someone who wasn't there in person, and Jay, you can probably speak to this better.
Yeah.
Um, the mask enforcement was on the better side of things.
Yeah, I mean, it was very much people were actively looking. There wasn't kind of a hey, put your mask back on, put your mask like it wasn't. There was none of that. Everyone had a mask on. I mean, I think they said they had a few instances where they had to remind people, but we were talking about this earlier. That only entails when you're at the conference. So there was definitely a lunch that I went to where we're outside, we're walking to a place to eat. Nobody's wearing a mask. We get to the restaurant, nobody's wearing a mask. Several dinners in which that happens. Even vendor sponsored happy hours and things like that. Which if I'm looking at the timing and who reported to me that they tested positive, I can kind of pinpoint where I may have gotten it from. Not with any level of certainty, but like I was standing in line unmasked next to a person at a vendor sponsored happy hour, and then that's the first person I hear that says they tested positive, and it was a few days before I tested positive. So like if I put the all the yarn and the pins in the board, it seems like that's where it came from. But again, PyCon can only do so much,
Well,
and just the fact that they are even able to just say that we're going to do this much, to me is good. Like, we're going to do what we can. We can't obviously do everything. I mean, there are some, like, I think WWDC, like when they do like private entrance, like you have to test like every day and provide a negative test. Even DjangoCon, like you had to provide a negative test at the door. Like within so many hours before the event, you had to put it in Share My Health, and if Share My Health hadn't approved it yet, you had to show them the test. So it's like it's a level of like care that goes in. So I'm interested in the pledge portion itself. Like, do you think that the pledge is too strict to and I'm as I'm reading this, the rule of minimizing the number of participants who are infected by requiring vaccines including boosters, to me that means that PyCon US does not qualify for this,
well,
because they specifically say they're not requiring specific boosters due to availability and timing.
yeah. So I think that there are a lot of nuances that haven't been fleshed out in this yet and need to be. Right? Because when you say, right, these specific booster requirements, um, you know, PyCon US used to just be called PyCon, and even though it's called PyCon US, it's still probably the Python conference that has the most international travel associated with it.
Yeah.
Um, and right here, in New York, the boosters were only pretty recently available. And when you're going to say, well, nobody can attend uh, these events if they don't have the same availability of vaccine boosters as a particular state in the United States, that becomes at odds with a lot of other things that the Python community really tries to push.
Yeah.
Right. So you can't just exclude parts of the world because they don't have as much access to booster vaccines as other specific regions of the U.S.
Yeah.
Another thing that's difficult about this is, right, this isn't coming from public health experts, right? And I'm told that there's some work on that front of
Hmm.
getting people with expertise to really weigh in here. But New York's different from California, different from countries all over the world. So these aren't things that I think that can be necessarily globally applied, right? Especially
Yeah.
because there were some additional discussions recently about why PyCon hosts why PyCon US hosts events where they do, right? And
See my keynote at DjangoCon.
yeah, and so there's a lot to be talked about here. There's also um, PyCon US has some amount of actual staff, right?
Yeah.
Most events that in the class of the types that I work on, right, are we usually use the term community events, right, and this means they're pretty much entirely volunteer run, and right, this no questions asked refund policy Um, you know, that might mean that the you know, deposits that someone's paid um, right off the bat now have to come out of an individual's pocket.
Yeah.
And so this is a I very much agree with the spirit of we need to make these events safe.
Yeah.
Um, and a lot of these fall in line with the things that I am personally looking for in an event. But I do think that somewhere, if you look down below, I think right above the signatories there's a mention of an organizer guide. I
Yeah.
think that we're going to need, that's not going to be a small document, right? And it's going to require contributions from a lot of people in a lot of places because it's just this as written, I think, is
These are like
too short
suggestions.
to. Well, but it doesn't say they're suggestions, right?
I mean, there's like a, it would be incomplete without an overview of types of active measures that they can take. I don't think it's saying, you know, you have to do these. I think that they're mostly just saying like do things. And I agree with you on the point of like PyCon has, or I guess the PSF has lawyers, like, or at least a lawyer. They have contracts that might like require them to be like, well, maybe we can't enforce this. Like, we have a contract with this policy. Like, we have to abide by the rules of whatever the venue is. And if the venue says you don't have to do this, now you've got individuals that are in conflict. Like, I mean, I think about EuroPython. When we went to EuroPython, they had like the venue itself had staff available that were assisting people in finding what rooms to go to, that were, ultimately a form of security. They're walking around with walkie talkies talking about, something happened in this foyer or whatever. So when you have that, are you going to train all of their staff to be like, well, these are the rules that need to apply, and that might work in one place but not work in another. And I think that we have some good comments from chat that talks about, again, from Jessica, that says there's so much nuance here with how events can be run and keeping everyone safe. And like you said, ultimately we have to wait for things to kind of evolve. And then Mason, and I'm kind of glad of like the folks that we have in chat are actually people who have also had some experience in participating and organizing conferences. But Mason saying that he believes that the pledge is limited to, just kind of the white box, and then everything else is kind of a, hey, let's continue to learn and do more. And that in my opinion is like the hardest part about pledges like this. We talked about this offline, and I said, I can't sign this because I might be asked to do a thing for work that doesn't follow this policy. And now I'm, stuck between, working with my employer or, going to and participating in an event. And I get the sentiment, and I get the value of having the sentiment there and the value of doing something like this. And I think that in order for it to grow and develop, it needs to be done in conjunction with conferences big and small.
Well,
And go ahead.
I think that there's also right individuals signing this is I think the stage we're at. That's the names you're going to see on that page. But at the end of the day, the thing that's going to decide this is what corporate sponsors and events themselves are going to put in place, right?
Yeah.
Uh, if an individual signs this and then right their employer sponsors another event that doesn't comply with these things, you're missing, like there's a gap there, and
Yeah.
until as much as I would love to say events are totally free to run and don't incur personal costs for the people who put them on. That's it's not true. Events can often be pretty expensive, and it's difficult to run events without without outside money involved. And for this to become like really enforceable, it's going to end up kind of falling on, well, what's ending up in sponsorship agreements, or if you're running an event without sponsors, that then you have a whole other conversation around pricing in order to make something affordable to all the attendees you want to be able to accept. So
Yeah.
that there's a ton of nuance here. Jay, you and I and a bunch of other folks have talked for literally hundreds of hours at this point on uh, what goes into running an event, uh, and kind of some of the behind the scenes truths that are a little often hidden away from attendees. So I you said, right, your job involves speaking at events that might you know prevent you from signing this. A lot of other people have similar jobs, right?
Hmm.
And uh, as a conference organizer, a lot of people in those jobs go to a lot of events, right? So that's there's there's a significant overlap there between, right, the people whose job it is to speak at events and the people who speak at events.
Yeah. And I definitely agree with you on the point of like at some point this is more focused on encouraging conferences to do, I guess, more actively towards providing these sentiments. And again, like people signing the page is only going to say, well, I can guarantee that, this number of people, this group of people will not be at my conference if I don't do these things. And I think as that number grows, and I encourage people that if you can and you feel like you're in a position to where you can, sign the document. Like I agree that health and safety policies should definitely exist. I agree that we should be doing things to mitigate all of the different vectors of transmissible diseases. I mean, I am on record of being like, anytime I fly on a plane, I'm wearing a mask, not because I don't, I'm worried about catching COVID. I'm just don't like the idea of sitting in a box where the air is being recycled and people coughing all around me. So like there's just like I am pro masking even non pandemic areas, but I didn't start doing it until something like this happened. And now that it's happened, like I will hopefully want to do that more often. But I can definitely understand, as I went to an event earlier this week, and I think we were talking about this. Literally, I think it was the same day as this event, and it was the first time I'd ever gone to this meetup, and I had no idea what to expect. And when I got there, like there was like one person wearing a mask, and I was like, oh, well, see, now there's like this peer pressure thing of like, am I going to wear a mask? And I'm like hanging out outside talking to people for a while, but once we went in and sat down, yeah, I put my mask on. So I think that we don't, as conference organizers, as meetup organizers, as user groups and all those things, you don't want to be the reason that someone gets sick, obviously, but you also don't want to be the person that feels like they pressured someone into making a decision that they were uncomfortable making. And ultimately those people, they just don't show up. So it's better for you to just say, you know what, we're going to do everything in our power to make it as safe for everybody. And I mean, this goes way back. This goes all the way to like removing phrases from like tech jargon such as blacklist, whitelist, master, and like slave. Like, sure, at the end of the day, they're words. Do the words physically hurt somebody? I don't know. I can't answer that. Will it make people feel more comfortable contributing? Absolutely. Therefore, it's probably in the best interest of the person to just adopt the new thing, in this case being those health and safety guidelines, because it's going to make people feel more comfortable.
Yeah, and I think the big thing here is that this is the beginning of this work,
Yeah.
right? This isn't okay. Here are the pledges online, and now we've done it,
Hmm.
right? And the organizers behind this, right, know this as well, right? This isn't this isn't okay. It's finished, and now we can move on, right?
We've solved the problem, folks. We can leave.
Right. This
We're good.
is now we build out organizer guides. Now we
Hmm.
figure out how to, communicate these things to sponsors and get those in, and get these kinds of agreements in place as part of sponsorship agreements. Because if you've ever worked with uh, a sponsor, for an event, there are a lot of things that come into play that are like, okay, your event has to meet these, these types of guidelines. Um, Usually that's code of conduct, and uh, a handful of other, um, requirements that are just part of running a good event in general. But there's much more ahead of the road here.
Yeah.
It's it's not okay. We all signed the thing, and now events are perfect. This is a way to begin talking about what do events look like, going forward,
Mm.
um, right? Both in person, virtual, hybrid. Um, how does the conversation around sponsorship um, and like foundational backing work? Right? There's so much to continue this conversation about, and I think that's where a lot of the things I'm seeing are missing the mark a little bit,
Yeah.
which is right. Okay, well, event X doesn't comply with these requirements. Well, those requirements were published, a year and a half after event X got uh, all of its guidelines in place, right?
Yeah.
And so right, this is, I think, a starting point for some of the work that needs to be done to continue building an event in a safe way,
Hmm.
and not a way um, to start saying, well, this event doesn't comply, right?
Yeah.
Because I've said this about a bunch of events. Like, I wasn't going to these events that are changing their masking policies at the last minute anyway. This isn't it has nothing to do with this pledge. It's just not what uh, what I would participate in.
Yeah.
Um, but there's so much that's involved here with, right, all of the organizational bodies that are behind these events, and at the end of the day, most of those are people, again, doing these things on a volunteer basis in their spare time. So when it's like, hey, here's how we think you should be uh, defining policies around your events, um, there has to be a lot more uh, guidance, and like, who do I hire in order uh, to to get me on that right track?
Yeah.
Because I don't I don't do my own catering for events. I don't do my own AV for events. Right? There are a ton of vendors that a lot of people don't necessarily think about in the context of holding an event with hundreds or thousands of people.
They need to
Um,
hire the health and safety consultants.
I mean, yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's it's there are consultants for all sorts of different things, and I wouldn't pretend to know how to run a health and safety program, uh, you know, from the ground up.
Well, I wanted to ask you, and we can kind of button it up on this one too. Is one of the things that they talk about is this organizing guide and things like that, and they also promote this idea of making sure you have alternative ways to participate in the conference. And I know that this is a thing that you've thought a lot about with the idea of like what does a good hybrid conference look like? Are we any closer to that? Because I mean, a lot of this is predicated on if for some reason you're upset with wearing a mask, or if for some reason you test positive, or you need an immediate refund, you're now relegated to a subpar experience. And that's been a thing that we've talked about a lot on this show of just like who is doing hybrid conferences right? Where's the guides on how to do this? What are the things that people are doing? Do you think that having documents like this or initiatives like this, is that only part of the battle? Is like the other half, like we really need to figure out what this hybrid model actually looks like, and then also what is the infrastructure, what is the cost for that to be in place? Because I mean, I feel like at the end of the day, if just telling people, well, like, yeah, you're gonna miss out on this and you're gonna miss out on all the fun, too bad, that's just gonna drive people away from not going to conferences.
It's so I've said this to a bunch of people before, and I've said it as a complete non sequitur. So if you've met me, we may have you may have had me just like interrupt you mid sentence to chime in about this. We've had many decades of experience of running industry events like this, right? We don't have that same thing in the context of online only or hybrid event. It's just a lot of these uh, sorts of playbooks exist, even if they're not explicitly written down, on building on in the experience of people who've done this over and over and over again.
Mm,
And we're very early on in the world of running hybrid and online events. Even events that have been around, right? We're still talking, you know, a decently small number of years, right? Compared to, if you go and you look at, right, industry events, in various industries have existed uh, for a very long time, predating the internet, right? So, um, just by necessity, there's not a way that we could have this much experience.
yeah.
So it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of uh, cooperation amongst organizers to figure out how to do things right. And the same goes for the health and safety measures, right? It's a matter of we're going to go and we're going to figure out how to do some things right, and in the process we're going to do some things wrong too, just because that's how the world works.
Yeah.
um, and I think it's uh, DjangoCon US recently, right, had an event, and you mentioned some of the testing and masking policies there. I don't think they've published any information about any COVID positive tests like after the fact yet. Um, so uh, I think that remains to be seen, but that's the kind of thing that we're going to need to see going forward, right? PyCon posted, here's how many people got COVID, um, and one of the I think one of the things you'll probably see going forward is, yes, some people got COVID. We don't know where, we don't know
Yeah.
when, right? It was throughout the course of this event, but beyond that, we don't have more detail, and
Yeah.
that's probably going to be um, a difficult point to continue to track down. But
I mean, I feel like, well, a few things. One, I feel like that conferences, a lot of folks are like, oh well, I feel like I got COVID at a event that was brought up by, that was from a sponsor. So for me, it was like, I feel like, is there not anything that PyCon could have been like of just, hey, if you do an event on behalf of, hey, welcome to PyCon, we're doing this happy hour, we want you to learn more about us, that event also needs to follow the same rules. I mean, is there anything that they can do to enforce that?
I mean, yeah, you can make sponsorship decisions based on that, right? You can
Yeah.
say uh, you bake that into your contracts, but is it easy? No. Um, and I think that it I'm going to sound like a broken record here. This is going to take time.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to take
Well,
time figuring out how we go about doing these things.
I
And go ahead.
I want to push back a little bit on the it'll take time, but before I do that, we do have you know noted conference extraordinaire, PSF, DSF, DEFNA, like all the things. Jeff Triplett, who is also one of the organizers for DjangoCon, said that they plan to post something after they hear back from attendees. Um, 1 week out isn't close, is too close to say what worked. Get all that information collected. But the thing I want to push back on the it'll take time is it'll take as much time as pressure dictates. One of the things that I notice really easily is like every conference that I personally go to now allows people to go to the bathroom of their choosing or the restroom of their choosing. Regardless of what their assigned at birth gender is. One thing that I appreciated at DjangoCon, which is such a small little detail, they had like easy grab over the counter medicine that included hygiene kits that included like things like tampons and pads in both restrooms. And these are things that nobody had to like threaten them, I'm not going to this. It was an act of kindness. And I feel like, yes, in terms of like making hybrid models better will take infrastructure time. I i feel like the more pressure that is put on the decision makers to figure it out, the faster they will learn and the faster that they
I
will adapt.
so I mean, two responses there. One is my point is not that it takes time for people to learn how to be kind.
Yeah.
Like it's it does not take time to go to a drugstore and get a bunch of supplies that can be readily available to attendees.
Yeah.
It does absolutely take time to figure out what practices work to prevent the spread of a disease. Right? This is not
I
again. I'm not a public health expert, and the people who are have continually updated their guidelines around how to uh, how to exist in public spaces in the world of an ongoing pandemic.
Yeah. In
And
in that, I'm not necessarily, I agree with you on the like, yes, the world hasn't figured it out and it's been a few years. We're
Right.
working on that. But I mean more of the technical aspects of it. The things that make conferences feel as if, okay, if I'm having to do the virtual because I got sick or because I'm not comfortable going in person, I'm not being sold you know a subpar product. I think the faster and the more pressure that we put on conferences to share that information, share what worked, don't bottle it up. Like that's the thing that aggravates me because we are the people that go to these meetups, which I want you to plug before we go to the last topic. But like, you know, we're in there like trying to share in our little tiny community of like, hey, we went to this conference, they did this thing, that could be something. We were talking about like Mason, one of the people in chat, I think that was talking about the pledge, had this great idea of like, let's set up an open space at PyCon and use, Zoom so that people could feel like they were included. And it was like, we're doing these little things and saying, oh, we should make sure that we have, 360 cameras and things like that, and HDMI splitters. Like every conference I go to, you have people in the expo hall and the vendors and the conference organizers talking to each other there, but it's not trickling up to the larger conferences that are actually going to move that needle, that are going to create, oh, hey, this is the demand that we have. We are willing to pay people significant amounts of money to solve this problem. And I think that's what's preventing folks from going in and saying, you know what, we are actually going to dedicate time and actual effort into solving this problem.
So I absolutely agree that all of this is underfunded, underprioritized. But I'm gonna just throw out a phrase here that I think will resonate with a lot of people listening. That illustrates my point that it's still gonna take time, no matter how many resources you put behind something. Doesn't mean you're gonna end up with the correct answer right away. And you know what? Your mic's muted. How many times have you heard that over the past 3 years? Your mic's muted because we've been doing Zoom calls and Hangouts and the 75 other chat platforms I use on a day-to-day basis for years on end, and still people have your mic's muted problems, right? So a lot of that stuff is one, not even available at the moment, right? Even if you're working on well-established platforms, there are still issues that make it more difficult to attend something virtually. And I think that I know we're running pretty short on time here, but we end up having this issue of, kind of by its nature, right? It's easier to get distracted in the context of I'm attending an event virtually, right? I'm attending an event from my laptop or my desktop, as opposed to being physically put in a space with someone else. And most of the time, people are not going to make the same kind of arrangements to be, as 100% focused on an event they're trying to attend, unless they've traveled to a space where that's the only thing they can do. So there's plenty we don't know yet, and there's going to be a lot of effort needed building out, right, guides and tooling and best practices to share with other people on how you actually make an event workable, because it's not trivial. It just isn't.
Yeah. Kind of a follow-up on that from Jeff. No one's pulled off a good hybrid yet to know what it looks like. And the DjangoCon did not bad and gave other conferences something to learn from. So yeah, it is fair to say it's going to take time. And again, I agree that it will take time, but I think that the amount of time is variable to how much information we're sharing and how much we're investing in doing that. Which, speaking of take time, I want to take two cracks at that segue. One, if you have some time, we actually often meet up in this wonderful Discord channel that John, I believe you started a long time ago. I say a long time ago, it was a few years ago, called Conference Organizer Chats. And you can go to conferencechats.org, which I should have made a banner for that. There we go. I did. It's right here. Conferencechats.org. If you're an organizer, a conference organizer, a meetup organizer, and you want, or maybe you're just interested in getting involved in one more, That's why I joined a few years ago now. And I wanted to become more knowledgeable in organizing conferences and understanding what those organizers were in need of, because I have my own dreams of doing a conference one day. If any of that sounds relative to what you're hoping to accomplish in your goals, then conferencechats.org is a place you can go. You can sign up for the Discord there. I'm in there, John's in there. We're all talking. We're having a good time. We're sharing some of the news that you might see being brought up in the show. But I mean, ultimately, anyone that does conferences is welcome to join. In fact, we encourage learning from other groups and organizations, not just the Python community. And then I did want to also bring up quickly, because I think it is important to highlight that there was recently a post that came out from Bleeping Computer regarding a lot of fake proof of concept exploits that involve malware. I can't go into too much detail because I'm not a security expert. One day we will have a security expert on the show to talk about those things. But ultimately, there was some really good guidance at the end, which I will just use to remind people, if I can get to the end, that ultimately be careful. If you're trying to show somebody a proof of concept and it's on GitHub, make sure it's on a repo that you trust. Make sure it's from an organizer that you trust or a maintainer that you trust. And if the code is too confusing, this is complicated, then test it out in an isolated environment that is away from your network. And then also report these things. GitHub is they already are aware of this, but you have to think there are, what did it say? Did it say thousands? Yes, thousands. They have to go in and vet and make sure that all of these things are what they are. They have to add them to a block list. They have to do all these things. So, 1,069 of them were present in just one database. And then, again, 150,000 unique IPs extracted, almost 3,000 block list entries, 1,500 malicious antivirus scans and things like that. These things continue to pop up. They're going to work on them. I think, John, if we've learned anything today, it takes time. So while GitHub is doing their thing, make sure you're doing your thing to also, try to be safe and make sure you're not exposing your system to, known exploits. That said, I think we've only got one conference this week, right?
Yeah. Tell us about the conference.
So I thought I had it in here. Maybe I don't. This is wrong window. There we go. So yeah, we actually have one conference for it's in the PyData series. It's actually PyData. I cannot pronounce the name. I'm going to do a terrible job at this yet again. It's Eindhoven in Sweden, and the CFP is open for a few more days. The CFP actually ends on November 2nd. November 2nd here. I'm not sure if that's anywhere on Earth or if that is local to their time zone, but talks for 30 minutes with a Q&A. They actually provide some really good tips on how to write a successful proposal. Be sure to go check this out if you are interested or you're in the area as well. John, this has been a really good episode. I'm excited for what's going to happen next week as more and more people are using Python 3.11. People are finding new things out there, and of course, we'll always try to keep an eye out for the most important news that people should know about.
Yeah, I think we are over time, so I appreciate everybody listening along, both in live stream and on the podcast. And as a reminder, we have a version of this that is just the facts. So if you want to listen to that, hit up pythoncommunitynews.com. You can find links to all of these live streams, as well as our weekly brief there. So Jay, I think that's all for this week. Yeah.
Yeah. If we missed a topic that you're passionate about and you want to tell us, you can head over to our GitHub repo. It's github.com/python-community-news/topics. From there, you can submit a topic or a conference, and we will make sure that you get all the credit unless you don't want it, and then we'll be sure to keep you anonymous. But that's going to do it for this week. I've been Jay.
I've been John.
And this has been the Python Community News.